Drawing this witchy cat is easier than you think, and I'm going to show you exactly how you can do it, no matter your skill level. Hello wonderful people, it's Genevieve, and my goal here on this channel is to teach you all about illustration and design. So if you're new, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the weekly videos and so that you can join our wonderful creative community. And with that said, grab your drawing tools and let's get started. So we're going to start by creating a new layer so we have somewhere to draw, of course. For reference, the dimensions of the layer that I am using are these. It's literally just the size of the iPad screen, but make sure that you find dimensions that work for your own project requirements. If you're not exactly sure what that means, I have a video in which I teach you everything you need to know in order to pick a canvas size, so I will link it in the description below. And when that is done, go ahead and create a new layer for the sketch. Now you can follow this tutorial along using pretty much any digital art software, maybe even pencil and paper if you want. But if you're working in the digital art software, you're going to create a separate layer for the sketch. Otherwise, if you're working on paper, you're going to draw just very, very lightly for your sketch. In terms of color, you can use whatever you want. I like to go with neutral gray, but we're not going to see the sketch in the final result anyway, so seriously, it just doesn't matter. And in terms of brushes, in this video, I'm also going to be suggesting two different brushes. One is going to be a free brush that comes with Procreate, and it's going to allow you to follow the tutorial just fine, especially for this video. I mean, the brushes doesn't matter that much. But the other brush is going to be a brush from my Ultimate Illustration bundle, so you can check it out. It will be linked in the description below, along with a special promo code for the YouTube people as usual. For the sketch, you can use either in the sketching panel that comes with Procreate, the HP pencil, or if you have the illustration bundle, go ahead and pick the sketching brush. And we're going to do a super rough sketch, starting with just placing a line for the ground. So nothing complicated here. And then we're going to break down our cat in a few circles. So 2 for the body, kind of like this. They should be roughly the same size. And then 1 for the head, which is also roughly the same size. Here you can see it doesn't need to be perfect circle. You can have a bunch of lines. It doesn't matter. As long as you have something a little bit like this, you're fine. You can then create this S curve that is going to be the back, so connecting the 2 bottom circles together. And you can refine the shape of the head, making it a little bit more pointy, kind of like this, or you could keep it round if you want. Seriously, that's really up to you. You get to decide how you want your cat to look like. You also want to place a plus sign like this on the head to mark the middle both horizontally and vertically. And then you can map out roughly where the legs are going to be. So for that, I just draw very thin, long ovals like this. And believe it or not, you've pretty much done with the basic structure of the cat. This was probably the hardest part of the video. At this point, what you want to do is go in and refine everything a little bit more and finding which lines you want to use for your cat. So for example, here I'm drawing the back legs, so just 2 very simple C curves, one for the foot and one for the thighs, I guess. And we're going to do the same thing for the other leg as well, which is mostly hidden by the arms, but we still kind of want to see it peek a little bit. And you can also refine the arms, so instead of having them be ovals, you can have them be legs. So just kind of thickening the base. But here, just a little trick for you. Whenever you're drawing legs, or pretty much anything, honestly, whenever you're drawing illustrations, try to avoid having like perfectly parallel lines. So here you could have your legs be, you know, kind of like this, super parallel. Try to get some tapering, so try to get angles in your lines. Even if it's very subtle, it's going to make the illustration feel much more interesting. It's going to add a lot of flow and movement, and it'll make your piece look way less stiff. So that's a little trick that you can use here for the legs. You can also add the ears, whichever size and shape you want. I like them to be very big and pointy. I just think it's super cute, but you could go with small round ears. Probably won't look as much as a cat, but you could do that if you want. And as well, you're gonna go ahead and sketch the tail. For my tail, I want a super like spirally thin tail, but once more, you could draw whichever shape you want. Make sure that it is super loose though, so try not to erase, try to just draw one big line, and if you don't like it, you can always undo and start over again. You're also going to roughly sketch the eyes, so just 2 little round shapes around the middle line, the horizontal middle line. And since we're drawing a cat, you might want to go in and make the shape a little bit more like an almond. So once you have your basic placement, you can refine the shape of pretty much anything that you've drawn. And you can also draw the nose, so a little bit lower than the actual middle of the head. I like to draw like a little heart. And you can draw the corners of the mouth and then just connect them by drawing this kind of rounded W, which is going to draw a really cute cat mouth super easily. And at this point, your sketch is looking super messy, but that is totally fine. You can go ahead and flip it, so in the arrow tool here at the top, clicking flip horizontal, and that way you're gonna get a new look on your sketch, so you get to kind of tweak it a little bit more before we start kind of refining it and making it look good. So yeah, just kind of fixing anything that might look a little bit off. So flipping your canvas is always a good thing. It kind of gives you, a fresh look. You can also use the selection tool, setting it to freehand and making sure that the color fill option is deactivated if you want to move around a bigger part of the body. So for example, I'm drawing a selection around the head, and then going back to the arrow tool, you can either resize it, move it around, rotate it, just kind of do bigger tweaks that way in order to get a sketch that you're really happy with. So I thought the head was a little bit too small and not placed exactly where I want it to be, so easily move it around that way. So feel free to take all the time you need here. You can pause the video and tweak the sketch as much as you need. It doesn't need to be clean, but it needs to look the way you want it to look overall. And don't forget to flip it back, and then we're going to move on to the color. Well, it's not really color, but yeah, we're going to start making this look good. So congratulations, that was by far the hardest part of the tutorial. Now we're just going to create a new layer and kind of refine the sketch, or actually make a silhouette of the cat. So this new layer, put it below the sketch layer and rename it to cat. And you're gonna pick a pure black for this. Make sure that is, perfectly black, otherwise a step that we're gonna do at the end is not gonna work as well. So for your brush, you can go in the sketching panel and pick in the 6B pencil as opposed to the HB pencil. It is a little bit thicker, so that works really well. If you have the illustration brushes though, go ahead and pick the outline brush. And well, just like the name of the brush says it, all you have to do here is outline your cat. And here, in terms of this sketch, it's really a personal preference. If you like to have kind of this light gray on top of your sketch, you can, or top of your color, you can just leave the sketch as is. Otherwise, you can lower the opacity of your sketch and change the bending mode to multiply, which is going to make the sketch line still visible on the white, but they're going to disappear on black. So depending on what you want and what you prefer here, you can change the sketch to multiply or keep it as is. But really, all you have to do is draw the outline on the cat on this new cat layer, and later we're going to fill in the outlines to create a really nice silhouette. And with that, it is time for the secret password. So if you've watched this far in the video, please go ahead and comment witch. I know it might sound strange, but we've been doing this secret password thing for months now, and people really like it. For a few reasons. Honestly, for me, it gives me a lot of insight into how to edit and pace my videos better, which helps me obviously to create better tutorials for you guys, which is super important. But it also allows us to see who's part of the creative community that we're building here on the channel, especially for me. You guys know me, you see my face in the intro, you hear my voice throughout the entire video, but I don't know who you guys are. And whenever you leave a comment, I get to see either your name, sometimes even your face. And yeah, it's just so cool to see who's part of the community here on the channel. So just leave a comment with the word witch, and then we're going to keep going. We're going to fill in these outlines. And if you're not quite ready to fill in the outlines, totally okay. Just pause the video and then we're going to meet in the next step. It is important you take all the time you need to create really neat outlines, because this illustration is super simple. If the outlines are kind of wobbly, it won't look as good in the end. And if you're kind of struggling having smooth lines, you might want to do a warm-up. So I have a video for that. It's a quick warm-up that is super helpful. So once you're done with your outlines, we're simply going to fill in the shapes, so dragging the color onto the shape, and you might need to adjust the threshold. So for that, you're going to move your pencil towards the right and the left until you get kind of the moment right before it starts filling in the entire screen. So that way you make sure that you fill in as much as the texture as possible. So adjusting this threshold is going to depend from shape to shape. So again, you just move your pencil towards the right or towards the left until you get that moment right before it fills the entire canvas. And once you have your silhouette, feel free to go back with the paintbrush and tweak anything that you want until you're super happy with the whole shape in general. Awesome, so at this point we're ready to start adding the details like the facial features and everything, and for that we're going to create a new layer above the cat layer but below the sketch, and we're going to rename this one to details. You can also rename it to features or something like that. I like to call it details, pretty self-explanatory. And you're going to pick pure white. Again, you want to make sure that it is perfectly white, otherwise we're going to have some issues later. So for this layer, you might want to reactivate your sketch and put it to normal so that we can actually see it on the black. Otherwise, it might be a little bit harder to draw the facial features. But here, super simple. All you're going to do is draw, well, I keep saying it, the facial features. So the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and you might also want to add some little details like hair and like fluff, I don't know, on your cat at this stage. And the reason I personally like to draw them on a separate layer is so that we can move everything around super easily. So for features as important as the eyes, the placement makes such a big difference. And if we were to draw it on the shadow or like the silhouette layer, the cat, then if we want to move them around later, we're going to have to either redraw parts of the cat, or it's just going to make the whole thing much more difficult. As here, since they're on a separate layer, you know, you can just use the selection tool and the arrow, and moving stuff around takes a few seconds. On this detail layer, you're also going to draw the separation between the different body parts. So for example, here the leg should be kind of separated from the rest of the body. So nothing super complicated, just basic lines like this. Oh, and I totally forgot, you might want to add some little hair on the ears as well. So for that, going back on the cat layer, picking your black and just drawing little blobs, kind of like this in the ears, and it just makes the whole piece feel a little bit more cute. So if you're not necessarily looking for cuteness, maybe avoid this step. We're also going to be drawing the eyes on a separate layer while the pupil, so go ahead and create a new layer above the details layer and rename it to eyes or pupil or something you'll remember. And this layer, we're going to apply it as a clipping mask. So just tap on the eye layer and click clipping mask in the menu right here. And now everything we draw on this eyes layer is going to stay within the shape of the details layer. So that way you can just kind of draw a basic shape for your pupil. I like to go with more of a thin oval because it's a cat. That's kind of very cat-like. So super simple. Again, you can just fill in your outline by dragging your color over it. And the beauty of drawing it on a separate layer is you can always use the arrow tool and just kind of change the direction of where your cat is looking at. So super neat little trick. Yeah, just drawing on a separate layer and using the clipping mask. I do that every single time I have to draw eyes. You might also want to add a little bit of a highlight on the eyes, so just picking your white and sticking on this eye layer, you can just go ahead and draw kind of a little dot like this on the top of the eye. Again, this is definitely just for cuteness, so if you're not after a cute result, just skip this step. We're also going to be adding some whiskers on the cat, so for that you can just hide the sketch layer so we don't need it anymore, and it's going to allow us to see what we're doing a little bit better. So for the whiskers, we're going to create a new layer above the eyes. It is not going to be a clipping mask, and we're going to rename it to whiskers. And the reason we use a separate layer here is because we're going to use a really cool blending mode. So clicking on this little N next to the check mark for the visibility of the layer, you can go and pick the blending mode difference, which is going to be very, very low in the list. And we're going to stick with pure white. This is super important. And the beauty of this blending mode when we use white is that everything we draw on the black is going to show up as white, but everything we draw on white is going to show up as black. So that way we can draw the whiskers and we see them both on the black and on the white part of our illustration. And with the whiskers, don't be afraid to use the selection tool to select one side and kind of reposition it, because drawing whiskers is kind of tricky. One side usually look all weird and the other one looks fine. So don't be afraid to use the selection tool and the arrow tool and the distortion mode to just kind of resize, re-angle, and reshape your whiskers so that both sides look the way you want them to look. And at this point, we're going to group all of our cat layers. So just swiping them towards the right and then clicking the group option here at the top. You can then collapse your group by clicking or tapping on the little arrow and rename the group to cat. That way, if you use the arrow tool, you can move your entire cat around without having to select all the layers every time. So super easy. You can also use the resizing options. I like to set mine to uniform so that I don't change the proportions, but that way you can kind of place the cat exactly where you want it to be in your piece. Once your cat is where you want it, go ahead and create a new layer above the cat and, well, above the cat group, and rename this one to leaves or plants, whatever you want. We're going to also set the blending mode of this leaf layer to the difference mode, and sticking with the same brush and with white, you're going to go ahead and draw these blob shape around the cat. So here, no rule, you can draw whatever you want. It's kind of just experimenting and adding more details and more witchiness to the whole piece by drawing these black and white, thin, detailed elements. So here, I mean, yeah, there's really no rule. I'm kind of drawing some very simple plants, I guess. I want it to look like my cat is outside in the forest and it's like magical and mystical. So I'm just drawing these kind of random, planty, organic looking shapes. But you could draw whatever you want. You can pretend that your cat is indoors and draw more of a urban or super structured setting. That is totally up to you. I recommend that you try adding details but not solid shapes, so keeping everything as outlines but then adding details to the outline. So for example, here in the blobby shape, I'm adding kind of like a middle line, which would be the vein of the plant, and then later I'm going to add these kind of middle veins. I really don't know how to describe it, but yeah, you can see there's nothing super complicated here, but it really brings the whole piece together and it gives this mystical, witchy vibe to it. So this is kind of a meditation. This is kind of a drawing meditation that you can do as well. You kind of zone out. You can kick back, take a nice warm drink, a little snack, and just kind of draw whatever shape comes to your mind. Yeah, trust yourself here, really. So I'm going to speed up the video a little bit. I'm going to stop talking to let you focus, but all you're doing is you're drawing these shapes, and then I'm going to give you a few more tips on how to finish the piece, so the background and everything. So it's a good idea to also add some shapes in the background to make it a bit more full. So for that, you can create a new layer below the cat group, rename it to background or something like that, leaves, whatever you'll remember. And this one, you want to make sure that you don't change the blending mode, you keep it to normal. Otherwise, you're going to get too many overlaps, the color you're going to keep on changing, and that's not what we want. So here you're going to draw with black as opposed to white, and you're going to draw again the same kind of organic or structured shape depending on what you decided on. I'm going to keep drawing some basic leaves and blobby shapes. Another thing with the background is it can get quite overwhelming, so don't hesitate to use the arrow tool to move the shapes around as well as resize them if needed. And if there's too much overlap at any point, obviously you can use the eraser to go ahead and erase kind of the bulk of the overlaps. So I personally am going to do that on most of the leaves. When there's an overlap between the background leaves and the front leaves, I just erase the background leaf. We just want to make sure that we avoid clutter, because the background is there to support the cat, but we want the cat to still be, you know, the focus point. And if there's too much overlap in the leaves, it's just, yeah, we lose the cat, and that's not what we want. So feel free to use the eraser and go in and erase any part that is a little bit too much. That's totally fine. You be the judge. I personally also like to add little circles and little dots around everything. It makes it feel a bit more mystical, and it's also a really helpful way to simply, like, really quickly fill in any gaps that might be left without having to draw more leaves, which adds to the clutter. So that's a nice way of kind of fixing the composition if you have any issues there without kind of having to replan everything. And if you enjoyed this tutorial and want to learn how to draw more things related to fall and Halloween, I highly recommend you check out this playlist, in which I'm going to teach you exactly that. But before you leave, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the weekly videos. Then click on the link right here, and I'll meet you there.